ready as you're going to be?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, of course.
Like I was just saying, my hope with these conversations is that people can get a better kind of feel for who you are and how you wound up at Red Cedar.
Yeah. Wild ride.
Yes. And like I was saying before, I would love it to be conversational. Okay. So, if questions come up that you have for me, feel free to ask me.
Okay.
So I think, are you ready to jump right in?
It.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have your bio up on the website, and that has your written story, but could you give kind of a verbal explanation of how you wound up here in Nashville working for Red Cedar? And again, you could probably talk for a long time.
I could talk for a long time.
So you can choose where you want to start and what you want to talk about and what you want to share about your personal story.
Well, so I would say that, like, I'm going to go back to when I first started working wilderness, essentially, because that was such an interesting time in my life. Like, I was 22 years old when I even found out about wilderness, and kind of not living the greatest lifestyle, really, honestly. So I needed wilderness just as much as the clients that were in wilderness, basically.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, right. Uh-huh. And I kind of stumbled upon it in such a really random way too. I don't think this is in my bio, but I was working in southern Utah and at a resort at Red Mountain Spa.
Okay.
And the program that I was working for did their parent seminar at our facility. And I was like, what is this thing? Blah, blah, blah. I looked into it. Didn't think anything of it.
So the program, Aspiro?
Aspiro, yeah.
Okay, so they were doing their parent seminars down at the Red Mountain Resort?
They did it. I think they did it twice.
Okay.
There, once while I was working there, essentially. And people kept calling and they were like, oh, we're with Aspiro. And I was like, I don't know what this Aspiro is. Apparently there was a fancy code for them to get a discount or something or other. And I looked into it and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, actually. I had never heard of wilderness before. And kind of put it out of my brain after that. I was still living in St. George.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to just 2 to 3 months later, I decided I was going to move to Salt Lake on a whim.
Just to get out of St. George.
I was there for 22 years.
Yeah, you were born and raised.
I was ready to go.
Yeah.
And I moved to Salt Lake and ran into an old friend from high school, and they lived with guides from Aspiro.
Okay.
And I was like, what? That is the weirdest thing.
Right.
I just heard about this place. That's so cool. They're like, you should come work. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I've never been backpacking before. I know how to camp, but they're like, oh no, it's so cool. You'll do fine. And they just persisted for months and months and months. And finally I hung out with them so often on their off shifts and stuff that it was just like, why am I not working here?
Right.
And it was honestly probably the greatest decision I made for myself at that time. It was a transformative experience for me.
Yeah.
And I mean, as you know, and that's kind of just continued to evolve. I've basically just been in some sort of therapeutic realm since then.
Yeah.
Whether it be through teaching or coaching or guiding in general.
Yep. I remember, weren't you, you were doing some Jeep guiding down around either St. George and or Flagstaff?
Yes. So I did, I was Jeep touring in Zion National Park for a while, which was fun to switch from therapeutic guiding to recreational guiding.
Yeah, right. It can be a bit of a relief.
A relief? People were a bit more excited to be there.
Yeah, right.
For sure. And it took a little less convincing.
Sure.
And I got to talk about other things that I was super passionate about, like the rocks and the landscape and the animals and everything like that too. Yeah. Which I did in wilderness also, but it took a little bit more coaxing for them to get excited about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Flagstaff, which is where I was right before I came to Asheville.
Yeah.
And I was Jeep guiding down in Sedona, Arizona, and then also guiding in the Grand Canyon as well too.
Okay. So, Jeep guiding?
Nah, it was still with the same company, Pink
Yeah,
Jeep, but I was doing van tours
van
above the rim
tours.
and like hiking in the Grand
Gotcha.
Canyon,
Okay.
in Antelope Canyon area too. Which, if you have you been to Antelope Canyon?
I can't remember. I don't.
You would
Oh,
remember,
okay, then
yeah.
I haven't been, unfortunately. Yeah.
It's in Page, Arizona, on the Navajo Reservation.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I haven't then.
it's one of the most stunning slot canyons I've ever been to in my entire life.
Wow.
Yeah, like 75-foot tall, red sandstone walls being like carved by both wind and water, and you're like it's about a quarter of a mile,
Yeah.
but it takes about an hour to walk through it because it's so windy and
Yeah.
twisty and stuff. Oh
Oh,
gosh, just so beautiful.
those southern Utah and northern Arizona slot canyons are amazing.
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 Yeah. I've
Yeah.
discovered some, well, not me, but a friend of mine has taken me on some adventures to like slot canyons that I didn't, know existed,
Yeah.
like on people's private property and stuff. He's
Right.
just like, oh, yeah, let's take this four-wheeler down the road and go hang out in this beautiful sandstone slot canyon
Yeah.
that nobody knows about.
Right. Yeah. Um, so how long ago was that you got into that you first started at Aspiro and wilderness therapy?
I think I first started guiding with the Spiro in like 2009, I think it was. And then I guided for a year or two, took a break off, guided for a year or two again, and then left. And kind of floated around after that. Did a lot of backpacking, and mostly in Northern California, and ended up staying in Northern California for like 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and then moved back to Utah because I missed it.
It's an easy place to miss.
Yeah, yeah, and all my family's there too, so it was like also just an easy move back, and then I started working at Evoke when I moved back to Utah, and
That's when you and I met.
that's when we met.
Yeah.
And
You were doing like parent coordinator stuff, or what were you doing for Evoke?
I
Remind
was a
me.
logistics operator.
Logistics. Yep.
Yeah. So logistics operator, and then I also worked admissions for a little bit. I love doing the logistics, so that was my favorite part. So I got to
Yeah.
drive off road pretty much every day, all
Right.
day. um, so yeah, that was my favorite part, and I also got to be like the first face that clients got to see when they came to Wilderness, which is a pretty big responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I took pride in being able to, you know, be a calm presence for those clients that were coming in, and especially if they weren't really stoked on being there.
Sure.
Um,
So they would
yeah.
either fly into Vegas or St. George, and then you would
Mhm.
pick them up in a
Yeah.
van.
Yeah, most of our clients would come into Las Vegas,
Vegas,
and
yeah.
yeah, we'd
That's what I
drive
thought.
from there and
Yeah.
pretty much spend the whole day with them,
Yeah.
and prepare them for Wilderness.
So, I mean, as you know, there's a lot of controversy, and has been the last couple of years,
Yeah.
around wilderness therapy, and how traumatic, to use a word that's being used a lot, that intake process can be
It can
in
be.
and of itself.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
minus everything else, all the other aspects of wilderness therapy, but that particular piece. So you were seeing clients like frontline,
Yeah.
first like program person that they're seeing. Were
Yeah.
you like, how was that? I can only imagine like how that might have been.
I mean, I feel like there were definitely a few clients where I was like, oh, this is gonna be interesting, but I think for me personally, like, it was really important for me to just like be calm and be
Yeah.
centered, and like just be a presence, and not really try to be like any sort of like authority for them or anything like that, and more so just be like, I'm here to support you right now. I'm meeting you where you're at,
Yeah.
and that might be pissed right now, and that's okay. Like, you
Yeah.
can be pissed, and you can be angry at me even if
Yeah.
you want, and like, I'm here for you regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that caught a lot of people off guard,
Yeah.
because most people don't respond to people being mad at them, or saying really mean, aggressive things sometimes, and like, I get it. I fully understand it.
Yeah.
And with all of the negativity that's being like placed on Wilderness right now, and a lot of the different like regulations and things that are being put into place. Like, I think that there's a fine line between creating a safe space and then creating an unsafe space, essentially, with things. And I'm all for making it a safe space for everyone, but at the same time, like, I don't think there's a right answer.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, that line can be a bit elusive, right?
Yeah.
And probably specific to each person.
For sure. Yeah.
Which can make it hard from a programmatic
exactly
perspective, because it's, I can only imagine that it's hard to create that unique space that's kind of perfect for each client when you're dealing with multiple clients.
Yeah, when I worked admissions, like, that's kind of where I got like that, like, aha, like, holy cow, this is a lot harder than I expected, because this was kind of like during the height of the breaking code silence thing, is when I was working admissions, and I was doing the social media for admissions too. So we were getting a lot of people reaching out through social media during that time, and it was challenging.
Yeah.
A lot of these people that were reaching out to us had never even been to our program and didn't even know anybody that were in our program. And as like from a programmatic perspective, like, it was really challenging to even want to admit certain clients because they were such a high risk, and but then you could hear like the desperation in parents' voices.
Yeah. Like they were high risk from like a behavioral perspective. Running or acting out.
Or violence,
Yeah.
Aggression and things like that.
Okay.
And but like you could just hear the desperation in the parents, and they've gone everywhere and everyone said no.
Right.
And that's where the new regulations that are being put in place for others, for the client safeties, which is, I agree, like, should happen. But then it leaves like no spaces for clients that are in that high risk level right there, except for juvenile detention, essentially, which is really sad.
Yeah. I guess I hadn't thought about that to this point. Like, it's one thing to admit high risk clients that are potentially going to be violent, and try to work with them, and there's an inherent risk in that, like in physical confrontation, both for staff and for other clients. And you and I have seen many versions of that.
Yeah.
And in my experience anyway, like most of the time, like even when it did get physical, 8 weeks later, or 10 weeks later, or 12 weeks later, there was some sense, even from the client, of success.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that I talk about my wilderness therapy experience is like 90% of, and I worked with young adults, as you know.
I mostly work with young adults when I was in the field also.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Like they didn't necessarily want to be there. Right. And they, it was some version of the story of the only reason I'm here is because my parents want me to be here.
Right. Yeah.
It was either here or be homeless.
Some ultimatum of some sort.
Yeah. And so, they would be maybe anywhere from reluctant and reserved to just pissed and obstinate, and like 90%.
Right.
But then by the end of their stay, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is, that same 90% would have some version of this story. Yeah, I was really pissed to be coming here, and I'm glad that I did.
Yeah.
I'm glad my parents essentially forced me into this. So, yeah, I think, so, even with those, like adolescents, typically, and I guess some young adults could get physical, but with young adults, we would just kind of,
it's like, okay,
yeah, you can leave the program.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With adolescents,
in some cases,
it's different. Yeah. But now that I think as an industry, wilderness therapy is becoming probably more and more risk averse.
Yeah.
Because of breaking code silence stuff.
Yeah, so I think, where do those clients go?
Where do those clients go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
maybe it's like state hospitals and like correctional facilities, and like,
which are not funded very well, and
not funded well,
or even less safe
Yep.
and more abuse, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, probably
Yeah,
a much higher potential for abuse in those
yeah.
situations.
And the types of facilities that like Breaking Code Silence was reaching, like was like speaking out about, most definitely like the staff were underpaid, the staff were undertrained. They were like young college kids that were just getting a job to
Yeah.
just like for the summer kind of thing. And the place that Paris went to was a pretty high risk place too. Like there were a lot of clients that were like violent and super aggressive, and it just like I'm sure it was. I'm very positive that it was a traumatic experience for
Yeah.
everyone that was involved
Yeah.
in that, and it's unfortunate that there are many other facilities that are like that too.
Yeah.
I feel fortunate that I, at least in my experiences in wilderness and in other residentials that I've worked in, I haven't experienced that, and I'm like, okay, phew.
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
um, but what I'm hearing from clients now from their previous wilderness experiences, and when they find out that I worked wilderness also, it's 50-50. Like,
Is
oh my
it
gosh, I loved wilderness, or like that's child abuse. And I'm like, whew, yeah.
interesting?
Like I can hear and see like both sides
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Like coming from a client's perspective, like especially if they were transported
Yeah.
by professional
For
transporters,
sure.
that feels like kidnapping.
What they would call in the
Yeah,
field gooned, right?
gooned.
Yeah.
Yeah, being gooned,
Yeah.
which is just an all over wilderness term. And
Yeah.
I don't understand how that like language just like transported to every single wilderness program pretty much, but
Yeah, I know it definitely spread.
but yeah, like I mean, being transported, that feels like kidnapping,
Yeah.
especially when it's a surprise.
Yeah.
And I know that this might be maybe a taboo subject to say coming from like someone who's worked in like the program part, but I shy away from having transporters be involved. Like if you can get your kid to the program safely, that's going to be the best route for everybody, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Like if transporters aren't needed, don't
Right. If it's
involve
not
them. Yeah.
necessary, if nobody's in danger and you're just, maybe scared to have a conversation with your kid, like maybe you should be scared and have a conversation with your kid.
Right.
Like it could probably save your relationship and save some extra therapy sessions later on if you're willing to have that really hard conversation. And if they don't take it well, like you can still go through with it,
Yeah.
but at least now they feel like they're in the process, they're part of the process, and they have
Yeah.
some agency, even though they don't have too much agency. Well, with adolescents
Yeah.
specifically. But yeah, I've just heard a lot of stories
Yeah.
from clients that didn't like wilderness.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
They tolerated it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that seems to be the trend. Since Breaking Code Silence, is that there's just wilderness is looked at through a much more critical eye.
Yeah.
And I don't know because I don't pay attention closely enough to the details, but like people who maybe coming out of programs at the time would have said, yeah, there were a lot of aspects to that sucked, but I'm glad I went through it. Like I got something out of it. Who
Yeah.
are maybe now under like this kind of broader social influence, calling it
And
something
like,
else,
right.
right? Like
Yeah.
I do think, like with any kind of social thing, there's a social contagion
Oh, for
piece
sure.
to it,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the
not
more
to
people
at
you
all.
have on your side, the easier it is to be like, okay, wait, I guess that did happen.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
and having different realizations
Right.
because other people are coming forward. And
Yep.
yeah.
And I don't mean, that social contagion phrase can make it sound like I'm somehow diminishing
No. Yeah.
anything traumatic that might have happened. And
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't mean that by using the phrase social contagion. I'll put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
So from your perspective, like when you were transporting or not picking up
Mhm.
kids and young adults from the airport,
Mhm.
and this is tough, so do with this
Yeah,
what you want, but
throw it
like,
at me. Let's hear it.
like from your experience, like what percentage of those clients were having a traumatic experience or had a traumatic experience leading up to the airport?
Um, that's pretty hard. That's a pretty hard like percentage to come up with
Yeah.
because some people would present like they were okay,
Mm-hmm.
but you knew they weren't.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
putting on this face, they were doing what they felt like they had to do,
Yeah.
which honestly could be some sort of trauma response for
Sure.
them. It's just like, no, everything's fine, everything's cool, like I'm totally fine,
Yeah.
this is cool, whatever,
Yeah.
but deep down inside, that they were like terrified
Yeah.
of what they were about to experience. Some of them had zero knowledge of what they were even going into.
Yeah.
Um, but I will say that that the transporters that I met, that were bringing clients to us, were wonderful.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
they were kind, they were caring, they were considerate, but that doesn't change the fact that what they're doing is a traumatic thing.
True. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
same with what my job was, obviously. Like, yes, I'm kind and caring and considerate, but also I'm the first person they're seeing, and I'm also the last person that they're seeing too, because I would also take them out of
Drop them.
wilderness too.
Yeah. Bring them out of
So
the woods. Yeah.
that was a cool thing to see.
I'll bet.
That like seeing that really scared, anxious person coming into the program, and then seeing this like the light came back into their eyes pretty much. It was really beautiful to see, for sure. But definitely I would say a very low percentage of people were like, yes, wilderness, let's
For
do
sure.
this.
Yeah, absolutely. That was like very rare. Very rare.
Yeah. And
even with adults who are,
sure.
seemingly choosing to be there, like it was still rare to have someone like,
they
the
were
woods.
stoked,
Yeah.
And Espiro was an adventure therapy program. So we backpacked too, but not very frequently. We maybe backpacked like every third week in the field.
Yeah.
But we were like rock climbing, we were mountain biking, we went skiing,
Yeah.
we did canyoneering trips.
I remember you guys did a lot of fun, cool stuff.
So much fun stuff. Yeah. And so we were teaching like experiential things in wilderness, but it was still hard.
Yeah.
It was still a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
And we definitely, this was back, in the early days, and I definitely, there were some clients where I was like, wow, we're taking these clients into the front country, like
right, like
we're into gas stations.
Yeah, high risk here.
Yeah. Right. But I feel pretty fortunate that in my entire experience working at Espiro, I was in one control with a client, and it was a lot.
Yeah.
And I apologized and they apologized afterward. And I still have contact with that client, as like it's been 12 years now, pretty much 11, 12 years. So
yeah,
we did something.
So that was once at Espiro, and then
there were a few at Evoke for sure.
Okay.
And it was always with clients that like I had a decent relationship with, though.
Yeah.
And regardless of it being like a pretty intense experience, like I made it a point to like debrief afterward. Sure. Like and when we're both like in a less heightened state, and it can have like eye contact and be like, sorry that had to happen. Mm-hmm. You're safe now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. It's something that I would prefer not to do.
Yeah, I think
I'd like to work on all of the soft skills, yes, so that never has to happen.
That's right.
Yeah. But
no, I think it's a good catch, and it's a good reminder that just because someone wasn't necessarily presenting as like overly agitated or escalated or emotionally activated coming off the airplane doesn't mean that they still didn't have some kind of traumatic experience.
Yeah.
Because like you said, I mean, people deal with trauma
I'm really good at doing that.
many
Everything's
different
fine.
ways.
I'm
Yep.
totally okay.
That's right.
I
Nothing
can
to
deal
see
with
here.
this. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good reminder.
I think mostly I went into every experience expecting that to be not a great experience for them.
Yeah, like kind of as a baseline assumption.
Baseline, like this is
That
awful.
had to
I'm
have sucked.
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I think that's a pretty safe
Yeah. I
assumption.
had zero expectations of anyone being like, hell yeah, wilderness.
Yeah, right. Right. Very, very rare
Yeah.
that ever happens.
Yeah.
And my experience with transporters too is very similar. Like some of the like kindest humans, at least to my limited extent, to the extent
Right.
that I knew them, that one could ever meet. Some of them were kind of big and intimidating,
Very. Yeah.
but nonetheless, like very kind
Yeah.
people. But like you said, no matter how kind, when
Still
you're pulling
scary.
someone out of their bed in the
Yeah.
middle of the night
Yeah.
and they have no idea where they're going, there's some conditions there
Yeah.
for trauma.
And like I'm glad like things have changed dramatically for transporters as
Yes.
well too. Like I will say that back in the day not such great experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say from like maybe 2013 on a little bit better, but before that not so much.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I was downright surprised sometimes
Yeah.
at the with clients like arriving to us. I won't get into detail about
Sure.
that because yeah.
Sure.
But
I think that's been, there are some social trends that I have that I can be critical of, but I think that one in particular is like a no-brainer, like just being kinder and
For
more
sure.
considerate and thoughtful about how we're doing what we're doing.
More compliance if somebody actually wants to
Yeah.
like talk to you.
Yes. Can I
Of
build rapport and talk to this person?
wow, what a wild
Right.
concept.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
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 So at Aspiro, you were working with young adults. Is that what you said?
Almost entirely.
Almost entirely.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I worked in adolescent group maybe twice.
Yeah.
But I was with, they had a spectrum, a young adult group and a higher functioning adult group. And I kind of like oscillated between the two of them.
Yeah.
And I loved working in the spectrum group. That was my favorite.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of really different thinking human beings learning skills that gave them such like autonomy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I think we probably have, I tell parents that and consultants at any given time, maybe 25 to 30% of our clients are on the spectrum.
Who isn't on the spectrum nowadays?
Well, it's, no, that's true. It's all, it's not like anyone is completely off the spectrum. We're all
facetious,
on it. But yeah, I know.
Yeah.
There is that too, like
Yeah.
more and more spectrum diagnoses.
Yeah, or even just neurodivergence in general. I have ADHD severely.
Yeah.
And I feel like I work really well with clients who have ADHD also.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But one of the things you said, I thought it resonated with me is like with, those people who have a spectrum diagnosis or on the spectrum, the uniqueness through which they view the world and they experience the world.
Yeah.
And like, people might call it quirky, but,
yeah.
But it's cool to work with them and get like their unique perspectives on whatever they're interested in.
I love that.
Yeah.
Like info dump all of that on me,
right.
Please. I have zero interest in it, but because you're excited about it, please tell me everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I had zero interest, and now that you're talking about it, it's actually interesting.
Wow, I didn't know I had interest in quantum physics.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it was a wild experience, like being able to teach them like experiential things.
Yeah.
And some of them not even really like, I have like one vivid memory of one specific client that I adored that eventually taught me how to Dougie, which I don't know if you know what it is, but it's really stupid dance, but it's so hilarious. And that client didn't even want to get off the ground climbing. He would like put one foot on the rock wall, wouldn't even put any weight in his harness, and would like break down into tears.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
terrified of
Wow.
this, and we made it, a goal of his to at least sit in his harness, and it took weeks, but finally when he sat in his harness, the look on his face was just like pure joy.
Like to kind of
And
sit hanging from the rope in his harness. Yeah.
yeah, like he had to go up, one or two steps.
Yeah.
He's a
So
big
that he,
guy,
yeah.
yeah, so that he could sit down in it
Yeah.
and not fall down to the ground.
Right.
um but just like to see like the pure joy on his face and how proud he was that he did that.
Yeah.
And he was pretty far on the spectrum, lower functioning, and just one of the most like wonderful humans I've ever met in my
Yeah.
entire life. And everyone adored him.
Yeah.
Even when he wasn't being the greatest.
Yeah.
You still were like, come on, dude.
You're right. Still a soft spot in your heart. Yeah.
But yeah, I oscillated between both the K1 and K2. That's what we call them. K1 was more spectrum, and it was co-ed. Adults were co-ed also. Yeah, it was just a really beautiful experience. Sometimes it was just like camping with a bunch of friends.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
other times it was really hard therapeutically, and just a rough week in general.
Yeah.
But
earlier you mentioned you also needing wilderness therapy at that time in your life, and I can totally resonate with that.
I feel like a lot of field guides can resonate with that.
I know. Like when in the woods, when we would have visitors or like staff exchange, we would do like an intro group, and a very typical question was, why are you here?
Yeah.
And even like late into my wilderness therapy career as a field staff, I would always say, I'm here for the growth that I get out of this experience. Right. And so, yeah, absolutely. Even as a staff, profound experience that I continued to learn and grow from.
Monumental for me, honestly. And I mean, it led me to get into therapy too.
Same.
I didn't even think I needed therapy. I was like, no, my family's pretty messed up, but I got this.
But I got it.
Yeah, everything's okay. You know. And so like when I started working wilderness, my dad and I weren't talking. It had been maybe a little over a year, and I was pretty ready to just like be done with him at that point. And my parents had been divorced for quite some time, but I think by like 10 years by that time. And it took one person, that was one of my co-guide, who's an older gentleman, Mike, wonderful human being, that I kind of looked up to as like not only a friend but like a father, pretty much. And at the end of the night, when you debrief with your co-guides and things like that, it was I was pretty upset about something that my dad had like reached out, and was pretty upset about something, and Mike said something that I'll never forget. I'm not going to say it out loud because it might make me cry, but and it just made me realize like that my dad is like a human being going through his own like trauma, and he did the best he could, and even though it was awful, like that's all he knew. And if he knew better, he would do better. And I got out of the field and wrote him like the longest letter, and sent it to him, and we never talked about it, but things got different after that. Yeah, things were very different after that. And it took many years, but now I enjoy being around my dad. I love having conversations with him. I can see him as like the human that he is, with his own like experiences, and outside of like what our experiences were together, we're trying to create better ones now. And it was really hard. And I'm sure that's like what a lot of clients learned too, in some aspects, like being in wilderness and having different like figures to look up to. And I'm sure Mike was that person for a lot of people.
For a lot of clients. Yeah. So that interaction with Mike led to this like reconnecting with dad, and then this new different relationship.
Yeah.
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 I do. I mean, I think that closely parallels like what I used to see in the woods with clients
Yeah.
and their parents.
Did you
Whether
just have
it's like,
one or two really good
yeah,
experiences with
with
an authority figure or
peers
a peer? Yeah, that just,
or staff.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, a lot of that kind of parent work was forced, it was mandatory, but even so, like, like we used to call them impact letters, and then they,
Yeah.
different programs call them different things, but letters of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it was mandatory and forced, like I would say 80 to 90% of the time there was something that was at least partially healing and useful that would come out of those
Yeah, even if
exchanges.
it was like, I hate you, this is
Yeah,
everything you've done to
that's
me,
right.
like that's cathartic.
Yep.
Like, okay. Which
Yeah.
was kind of honestly how my letter to my dad started. Not necessarily, I hate you, but these are all the things you did that
Yeah.
made me feel really sad,
Yeah.
and abandoned, and, and like you've never shown up kind of thing. And I'm sure that was really hard for him to read, and which is probably why we never talked about it. And
Yeah.
that's also my family's style. It's just like, don't talk about it. Just
Yep.
shove it under the rug. Everything's fine.
Yeah. Nothing to see here. Uh-huh.
And I think thanks to like my experiences in wilderness and the connections that I've made there, like I have become the catalyst for my family to be more open to therapy, to talking about things that are hard, to bring more value into our relationships and things like that. And it's huge. I
Yeah.
feel like, and just by like me being willing to be vulnerable with everybody,
Yeah.
it's like everyone's like, oh wow, I guess it's okay to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
So working with young adults in this context, in the
Mhm.
context of Red Cedar,
Yeah.
What are some of the unique challenges, and then hopefully the maybe unique pleasant surprises of like this context and this model?
Yeah. I think that some of the challenges is if there's no buy-in.
Yeah.
Like if somebody doesn't want to be coached, if somebody
Yeah.
doesn't want to create any sort of like lasting change in their life, it's going to be really challenging to even just approach them.
Yeah.
Because it's like, who am I to them?
Yeah. Right.
Like
Like,
I'm
I
some
don't want to
stranger
talk to
that's like,
you.
oh, what are your values?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
do you have goals and aspirations? Like, yeah, of course I do, but I don't know you,
Yeah.
and I don't need your help.
And I think that's a good point too. Like when I talk to parents and consultants, I do say that we tend to be a program for young adults who want to be here, who
Yeah.
want the support and want the help. And I believe that. I think that's
Yeah.
true. But that also is a full spectrum of continuum. So,
For sure.
we will get the young adult occasionally who is reluctant to be here and there is an element of them doing this to make mom and dad happy.
For sure. Yeah. We'll
Yeah.
work on that. We'll work on that.
Yeah.
Eventually you'll do it to make yourself happy, right? That's the goal.
Yeah, I
right?
mean that's one of our hoped for basic premises is that
evolve on purpose.
Yeah. And this is your life. Like,
right.
do you.
Yeah, I am completely detached from how you show up. Show up.
That's right. I don't have an agenda for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like it's difficult. I mean, I'm stating the obvious and restating what you said, but it's difficult to connect with someone who isn't interested in being connected with.
Yeah.
And like ours is a container that is porous enough and permeable enough and loose enough that it can be maybe even make it more difficult to connect with someone like that, because like I think of the woods or even like some kind of residential program where
it's more, like it's a bit more structure.
Yeah, like they've got piers right there and they can't go anywhere.
Right.
It's almost like having a captive audience.
Yeah.
Where here, like, they can go back to their apartment or, they're out in and of the world. So it almost makes it feel easier for them to kind of blow you off as a coach. And then like, well, maybe I'll just blow them off again tomorrow.
Right.
yeah, like we I think that actually makes it a bit harder because we've got to try to connect to them in this kind of real world context where we don't have kind of the container of other peers like they would have in the woods or even a
Yeah, they have
residential
more
program. More
choice.
choice, yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
and like giving people, I mean, have you ever been to like a restaurant and there's like way too many options and
Yeah.
you're like, I don't know what I want now.
Yeah. Right.
You know, and so like I feel like that's with a lot of our clients is like they have so much choice, they don't know what the right choice is, and I'm not going to be able to tell them what the right
Yeah.
choice is. Like they have to figure out what the right choice is. And like if being on the couch is the right choice for them right now and not coaching, it's going to be very challenging to get through to them.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but
Yeah.
maybe eventually it'll happen.
Yeah. And that's where, I think, as I think of our kind of approach in situations like that, is, I mean, it varies from client to client,
For
but
sure.
I think our go to position is okay, and we'll let them kind of live their lives
Flounder a little bit.
and flounder a bit.
Yeah.
The phrase I use with parents is scrape their knees on life. And as long as parents are holding their boundary with, not kind of enabling that,
Right. Yeah.
then at some point the hope is that they come back to us from this position of agency and okay,
Yeah.
I guess I would like the help or I would like the
Right.
support.
Right. It actually seems like I might need a little bit of help.
Yeah, right. Maybe I don't
Yeah.
have this figured out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. I don't think anyone has it really all figured out, you know?
Yeah,
Like I
none
feel
of us
like
do really, but yeah.
like we thrive in community and most people are terrified of it.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
you know, people are scared to make connections outside of themselves because it's scary to be abandoned, I guess,
Yeah, and
really.
vulnerable and
Yeah, super vulnerable.
being seen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's safe to say that broadly speaking, we're a social animal, and yet that typically and consistently shows up as one of the top two or three difficulties that clients show up with
Oh, yeah.
is, the social or interpersonal realm.
Well, that, and then, you know, like moving to a new city too, if they're
Yeah.
not from here, and like trying to help them find community
Yeah.
essentially. And like that's one of my things that I've been like trying to do with a lot of my clients excuse me, that don't have a lot of social skills, is like going to social activities with them,
Yep.
appropriate social activities that
Sure.
a coach and a client would go to. But like I feel like my main goal, if I could do this one thing and one thing only with all clients, I feel like their success and their trajectory in life would be like just up from then. But if I can help them discover who their authentic self is and what is their passion in life, community will come essentially. If they, as long as they like follow that and show up authentically in life, community just like magnetizes to you. Pretty much
you'll find your people, or
your people will find you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like I don't know, I really do think that like we thrive in community, and the only way that we're going to find our people is by showing up as our true selves.
Yeah.
Doing the things that we love.
Right.
And
but then we're back to like the roadblock to that being like vulnerability.
Vulnerability, afraid of connection,
afraid of being kind of being seen. And
so there has to be willingness to like to talk about like why are you scared of being vulnerable?
Sure.
Like what are like I mean we talk about values a lot here at Red Cedar, and they're super important because it's like these are all your values. We'll discover all your values, but you do X, Y, and Z, which are like outside of your values.
Like in other words, like pointing out the discrepancy between what you say is important to you and what you actually do.
Exactly. Like the actions behind your values aren't in line with what your values are. Like what are the whys behind that? And those are really challenging conversations to have.
Yeah.
And some clients aren't ready for those just yet, so we'll just talk about the values and keep talking about the values,
Yeah.
making goals and doing some nudges here or there, being like, does that align with your values?
Yeah.
And then eventually being able to talk about like, wow, okay, like I do this because I'm terrified of this.
Yeah.
And then having like that really deep, like important conversation of like the why behind the actions, pretty
Yep.
much.
Yep. Being kind of compassionate and curious about that discrepancy between
no judgment,
what they say or what appears to be important to them and their behavior.
Yeah.
Like, interesting. How
Yeah.
does this how does this align with who you want to be? And,
Exactly.
yeah.
I another difficulty I've had is, clients, and maybe they do, and maybe I'm just not I'm not seeing it, but they're like, no, I know who I am. Unwilling to change any aspect of who they are, even though they're showing up in the world in like not such a great kind of way.
Yeah.
Like, no, I know who I am. I know exactly what I want. This is what I do, and this is what I need to do it. I was like, okay, cool. Do you need me?
Yeah, right. Sounds like you don't need me then.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me know if you need help, like cleaning your
tomorrow.
room, or
Where my mind goes when I hear that, like, I know who I am. The question for me that comes up is, are you being who you know who you are?
Are you
like,
living in that
it's
light?
One thing to think you know who you are. Are you actually being the person who you think you know you are?
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll say, "Yep," and then,
like,
it's like, "Well, okay,
my work's done here.
My work is done."
Yeah, easy peasy.
Yeah,
go off in the world.
Right. And then if not, then you're invited into like a richer conversation around that discrepancy between who they believe themselves to be and who they're being.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the hope is that even if they are, in that space of like, I know who I am, I know exactly what I want, they're still willing to have like an open conversation about it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, well, why do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Again, like finding out the whys. I feel like why is a really big, important thing, because like they're like, I don't know why, actually.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. A lot in that question that can be useful. A lot of our clients have never thought about the whys, right? They've just kind of adopted what they've adopted out of life,
or somebody's told them they need to be this. And they're like, no, that's
right.
That's what I want to be. And you're like, okay, but why? You're like, well, my parents want me to be that, or society has this, construct that like, this is what I should do. This is what I should be. I should go to school. I should get a job. I should have a profession. I should make a family. Like all those things.
All those shoulds.
Yeah, all those shoulds, and like, there's so many other paths that could be taken, and so many different like twists and turns. And most people like, nope, it's just this one straight and narrow. That's all it is.
I think some of our most important parent work is helping parents gain some flexibility and perspective on this idea that their kids, at least sometimes, don't share the same values that the parents do, and they're going to be their own people. And what I found is that parents rarely are like explicit and finger wagging about, this is what you should do, and I want you to be a doctor.
That's what kids are seeing most of the time.
Parents will, and I believe them. Like they'll say, John, we've never done that, and I have no reason to think that that's not true. But nonetheless, as kids, even if our parents are not finger wagging us into a certain way of life, like we're just picking it up through osmosis, through
just being present
who
in the
parents
world
are and who siblings are, and the broader social network. So we can kind of grow up with these ideas of what we should be doing, and that version of should isn't necessarily who we are authentically. Yeah.
I can think of a few clients that are living in that space right now.
I can too.
I think some really, really powerful parent work too is that just let go a little bit.
Right.
Yep. Let them fail.
That yes.
Yeah. Yep. Let them follow this thing that you don't think that they're going to succeed at, and be okay with it.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
That's where the lessons come in.
That's the scraping their knees on life idea. Yeah, that's where the real the most powerful learning
Don't
is
hold
going
on
to
so tight,
occur.
you know,
Yeah.
which is scary.
Yes, that's right. I think that's scary. And that's that parent work
Yeah.
where whether it's their own home therapist or one of our parent coaches or
Yeah.
like that's their work is to work through, or at least some of their work works through their fear of what their kid might be or might do. And
Yeah. Yeah. Or like just, I mean, even just to just like changing your expectation of like they're gonna fail. And I'm like, okay, well, what if they succeed?
yeah,
Like, what if this is something that they're like stoked about and you're like just putting it down?
yep,
You know, like, what if they succeed? What if they're so cool and so passionate about it that like this is their thing
yep,
and you're gonna be the person that tell them that it's not?
yep.
Like, oh,
The other side of that coin, though, and is like depending on what that thing is
for
that their
sure.
kids do, in my parent coaching, I give them kind of permission, or I invite them to think that it's okay that if they don't want to pay for it,
Oh
they
yeah.
don't have to,
No,
right? Like,
there's I mean there's boundaries and
for
there's
sure.
there's boundaries that need to be in place and like you can still support things
Yep,
and not be financially responsible
that's
for
right.
them.
There is a difference between financial support and emotional support. Like you
Definitely.
can
Yeah.
absolutely wish them the best and love
Yeah.
them and be
Figure it
there for them
out.
emotionally, but
Yeah.
if you want to pay for that, that's on
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. There's also, like there's definitely some passions out there that by like the broader spectrum of the world are maybe not that healthy, like video games,
Sure,
and
sure.
or just computer programming and things like that. Like a lot of people that do that are on the computer 10 to 12 hours a day.
Yeah,
And so like when that is the passion, like for me, like a goal isn't necessarily to like stifle that passion, but to find a healthy balance between that and life.
yes,
Like if you
right,
still need to still need to go to work, you still need to take care of yourself.
right.
It can't be this like diving into it and then like the whole world doesn't exist outside of that kind of
Yeah,
thing. You can still be passionate about it and also be healthy and take care of
yeah,
yourself. So there's that intricate balance of finding where life exists inside of your passion.
yep.
Yeah.
How to support the passion and still
Function in the
be,
world.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
function in the world. Yep, that's
Yeah.
well said. Cool. I think
We hit time.
I think so.
We didn't even get to how I got to Asheville.
I know. I'm
here.
We'll have to come back for episodes 2, 3, and potentially 4.
Maybe.
Yeah. But I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Talk to you next time.
Sounds good.
All right.
See ya.